All right, Coach D, you ready for a good one today?
Absolutely, always.
They're all good, though. They're all pretty good in their own way, right? They're all good in their own way.
Everybody just does what they do.
That's it. We have a great guest on, Coach Justin Kavanaugh, and I've known him for a long time. I think we're talking going back to like maybe 2007, 2006 time frame. We first started running camps. He played football at UNC, North Carolina, was a linebacker. That's just a little bit of background from his playing standpoint, but legendary trainer in the space of speed, quickness, and agility, and we kind of came up together a little bit during that time period. He has a facility still to this day where he's trained. He trained a lot of my pro guys, but he's really, he wrote a book a couple of years ago, Man Up, talking about, the things that kind of we need to do as leaders to really help people get to the next level, help ourselves. And he's really parlayed that into just coaching and mentoring people, not in the way that we think about coaching just as, on the football field, but coaching them in life, mentoring them and mentoring young people, and not just young people, but business owners and people looking to get to the next level. So without further ado, let's bring on Coach Cav. What's up, Justin?
What's going on, man? It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a minute, man. I miss you. I tell you that.
Hey, I still remember day one, man. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about. So it's a lot of fun.
Goodness. It's great to have you on, and for multiple reasons. Obviously, you're a fantastic athlete yourself. You coached so many guys. Like, you coached my guys, the Edmond brothers, and when getting ready for the draft, and but you've coached a multitude. That's just the tip of the iceberg. From a speed, quickness, agility standpoint, you were a coach on the field, and now you're coaching people, right? And really helping them and business owners. Why don't you give everybody, because it's been a few years, right? Your whole background, and we could roll from there.
Yeah, man. So I'm super excited. Obviously, just kind of going back, it tells a little history of like who we are, what we did. So I actually, born and raised in Miami. Mom's a teacher, dad's a firefighter. Grew up in a lot of fun area, right? So I called it fun. My parents called it trouble. And that kind of put me in an environment where it's like, hey, they need to put me in a better space. I learned at an early age that environment, always wins. So, wherever they put you, you're going to learn to either, sink or swim within that dynamic. And my parents wanted to put me in an environment that was, better than kind of where we were. So, I went to Day Christian High School. And I actually, now I'm excited to talk about this because I just went down there about a month ago. They tore up the entire field. There's no football field there. There's no track there. Used to be one of the number one facilities in the state. They won't have a record to like any sort of athlete that's there prior to like 2008. Like it's like the school didn't exist, which is criminal, right? Yeah, they wiped the whole thing out, and it's nuts because like I remember, back in these are the glory days with Dave and NUC when he would go to. I think you started one of the first camps you did down there, and then you would stay on the beach, and he used to do like nice steak dinners, and then he basically had all these like college kids working for him, which basically meant that we would get like a little like lunchbox, little Lunchables, $1.50s, and then so
you're telling me that's not what NIL is offering now?
Yeah, the stipends were a little different back in the day. I will say that, So when he would work the camps, when Coach Schuman was there evaluating talent, he would. That was back when he had his old track suit and whistle.
That's it. All fired up, doing his warm up, right?
Yeah. Let's go start. Like he was freaking clapping, like he had a, like.
Yeah, he was out there, like, hey, let's go.
Hey, people need to know that he used to be able to come downhill too. So I'll
that's right.
His props. He used to come downhill and bring it. But those were like the good old days. So that's kind of where I'm from. I think it is a lot of fun to talk about today. I would say your athletic career. My career, I had a lot of success. I was a 5-sport athlete. I was an All-American. And I'm comfortable saying that I had a lot of success because for many years I used to tell people, that, my career was cut short and all these excuses. Look, the reality is like if I could have made it, I would have made it. My body didn't have what I thought it had in me. My brain was better, and my instincts were better than what I could actually, finish through. I did get hurt, ended my career. So, what I thought was going to be a lifetime of sports, that I was going to make millions of dollars and then come back and be Iron Man and a philanthropist giving back to the sport, turned back into me falling through a roof 25 feet, breaking my back and not being able to walk. And then kind of through that, learning lessons of like getting myself out of there, that was kind of like God's fast tracking me into coaching. Yeah. Right. And, so that's kind of what happened with me. So my career was basically a cup of coffee. But one of the things that I learned is, I was able to take all 5 of my visits in the recruiting process coming out of high school, because my dad was like, look, we don't take vacations. Like, our family wasn't one that we were able to have paid vacations. That's what this was. I knew where I wanted to go. Actually, I wanted to go, and I signed with the United States Naval Academy coming out of high school. That's nice. Where I wanted to go. I think like growing up, my dream schools were UNC, Miami, and Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame, like Rudy. Miami, I grew up in that space. So like
you grew up in a great time period of Miami
Ricky Love was our quarterback, and he was the ball boy. And I used to go to UM all the time. So I knew everybody there. Like, it was nuts, So UM knew me since I was a puppy, so they didn't recruit me. Notre Dame didn't, even take a sniff at me. I had a family legacy that was kind of like in the Naval Academy. That's where I wanted to go. And then when I found out, like, day of that baccalaureate, that I didn't get in, I failed my Domberg because I had a knee surgery. And back then they didn't let athletes in unless you were like completely, like virgin skin, nothing touched you. And I got beat up. So, I remember kind of going through the process, and Chuck Amato recruited me pretty heavily when he was at NC State. He was actually at Florida State. And then I loved him because he had like this raspy voice, and then he had
he was a little different. He was
he had the glasses, he had the shoes,
he just had that different look of, now it's not so unconventional, but back then you looked at him and guys were like, wow, this guy really has a different type of appeal. Made a lot of guys want to play for him.
Absolutely. So I went up and took a visit to NC State once kind of like all the, everything kind of like failed out. Right. So, and one of the things is my dad said, hey, you're going to go on all these visits. You're not going to burn any bridges. So I went to like Tennessee. So I went to those schools. My dad actually wanted me to go to Memphis because he's like, and again, going back, looking at this, he's like, you could play on that field right now. Like, I show up and I'm starting, and I'm like, that's bullshit. I don't want to play for this place. And you're like, you're going back. You're like, damn it. Like, that's what I should have done. So, I remember like Tennessee's visit, they wanted to show me a good time. They're like, we want to show the guy from Miami that we could party.
Right. We do it better than Miami.
And I was like, what a bad move. Because like number one, like I grew up in that environment. Like, I knew what Coke was when I was 7 years old. I grew up in a party scene and I DJ'd. I didn't like that. I actually stayed on the straight and narrow because I was around that all the time. Right. And I was never influenced. It wasn't a matter of like, hey, a bunch of people were doing it, I was going to do it. It's like, I'm around it. That doesn't influence me. I knew what I wanted to do. So when they threw that party at me, I'm like, get me the fuck out of here. Right. That was like my mentality when I was on that recruiting trip. So word got out a little bit. Fun fact, I was part of the Colorado recruiting scandal. Dave, you remember that when they were like giving, like it was all I needed. So I was actually a part of that. So I was like getting like interviewed right afterwards. It was pretty funny. Now to think about like how far Colorado has come.
Right.
But so anyways,
like, okay, well, I guess that was kind of the scene back then.
Back then it was basically like he got game, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Show up, be like, I'll be back in 45 minutes. Okay, buddy, have fun.
So but that was like, those are very different days. And then so things didn't work out. And then because I didn't burn any of those bridges, Chuck Amato, I went up to go see Chuck Amato. I had a great conversation with him. But I walked in the locker room and I had all my friends that I kind of hung out with, like Miami Killian, Central, Northwestern, Carroll City, like different schools that I kind of hung out with when we're down there. Because people don't understand, like Miami has like 6 high schools on like one street. It's that busy and that packed. Yep. So I go there and I'm like, hey, hey, Cav, you got to come. Hey, you got to come. And I was like, well, hey, what position you playing? Like, he was a D lineman in high school. What position you playing? Like, he's 6'4". And they're like, oh, I'm playing linebacker. Oh, they moved me to linebacker. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to go over here. And at some point, like, you have to have a reality check of like who you are and where you fit. And I knew that. And that's kind of why I ended up in an environment where I wanted to play with a bunch of people that were slow, because I'm from Miami and speed was my game. Like, I was going to hit you behind the line of scrimmage. I had great reactions ability, right? And I'm going to hit you hard. And that's it. If it wasn't in front of me, good luck. I wasn't going to catch you because I had speed going this way, but I couldn't move the other ways, right? And I knew that. So I had like a high level of self-awareness. And I could almost, because I grew up playing the ball. My dad played at South Carolina. I grew up playing, football. I had really, really good coaches. My high school coach was Tony Nathan. My pastor was Don McNeil. I grew up around ball. So, similar to like Dave, where you were like, your dad, people don't even, I think what I would like to even like kind of fire some questions back at you, but like, how much did your dad play a role in you being a coach? Nobody knows your background, but like, that's a legendary coach on the track side.
Yep.
But no one talks about it because it's, we're now the old people. I was a young buck, right? But now we're the old people, and it's like we don't even keep those stories alive. But my dad played baseball and football at South Carolina, and it's like, my dad would tell me all the time, like, you just keep doing this, you'll write your own ticket. Right. So that fast tracked me into coaching. I got into coaching not just because I got hurt, but because of trust, right? I grew up in an area where a lot of people didn't trust others. So agents were stealing people's money. Trainers were working in collusion with those agents to kind of swipe cash from guys. And at the end of the day, I was a guy that they were going to call at, 2 a.m. when something didn't go well and they needed to throw down. So those friends became clients, and that's how it started. And you realize that everything at that point starts and ends with trust. And if you could do that and not fuck it up, you'll have some really good opportunities. And it just so happened that my friends, happen to be better athletes than me and then go on to play ball. So, that happened to be up to where I played against Sean Taylor, and Sean said, hey, we're rivals in high school. Come down and train my team. So he paid me to train Gulliver Prep. And it's like, that's how I got into those environments, right? I got into those environments through people that made it in my world that was like, hey, come train my guys, because I didn't make it. And had a lot of success, started at the top, right? And then you realize really quickly, like, don't mess it up. And then I met Dave at Dade when he ran his camp, but I didn't know Dave. I was a player. So like, I didn't know, I think he went down there like 2004. So I wasn't really coaching, right? And then I was I think it was like Orlando, you're at a camp, and he was short staff. Basically based on how he pays people. So, he shows up, rolls up, and there's no one there coaching, or whatever somebody was coaching, wasn't really doing it. So I jumped in and was like, hey, you need something to, run. And I don't really care. Like, one of the things that I do know is like, I'm not going to coach the way someone else wants me to coach. Like, I'm going to go coach it. So I don't believe in, like, when I was younger, like, I really didn't care. It was almost like, I'm going to prove a point. So I start coaching, and Dave's like talking shit, but he's like, I kind of like this guy. And I'm thinking to myself, I hear him say it. He's like, hey, why? Because he'll call you out in the middle of a thing. And I'll just be like, you worry about your crap over there. Like, we're going to take care of this. Like, and then also like giving somebody confidence as another coach. Like, if you think about it, he's technically the head coach in that environment because he's got to control everything. But giving the head coach confidence that, like, I got my unit, leave me alone. And that was kind of my mentality, and I didn't care. And that's how I had to kind of like cut through the age gap in coaching, is like letting them know that I'm going to be autonomous and I'm going to run my show. Now, I still understand my role. That's not saying I don't know my role, but we're going to take high levels of accountability, and we're going to make sure that we pop you in the mouth and we do our job. So you give that person, the person that's in charge of you, the confidence, everything works out. And that kind of has been like the map of my entire career.
We'll talk about, so that leads you up to then, and then talk about what you did at Speeden Sport Institute and kind of how you really evolved. So just quick background, obviously it's Speeden Quickness Training Facility on the surface, right? But it was, when I first time I came down there, I knew you were doing it for years when you moved up into Virginia, but then when I you said, hey, send, I can't remember who we first sent to you, but the first guys we sent over to you, and they just loved it. And then we sent more, and then a few years later I was out of the game.
Yeah. But you look at like the Edmonds brothers, you look at like Tim Boyle's story, you look at these stories, and it's like, number one, I think I have a really good knack for this, but I also have to kind of, tip my hat to someone that I think, sometimes does it better, which is talent identification, right? Which is what you do really well. Like, that's something that you do really well. And when you're able to identify talent, it's almost like a secret weapon, because you could basically get undervalued or underpriced, work. And that's like the easiest thing for coaches to do, because at a meet, it's like, you know it's there. Right. And yeah, that does kind of like feed into the ego sometimes. But the reality is like, if you could do that, then you could actually make it, you could turn it into something. And that's something that you had a knack for. It's something that I have a knack for. And then when we kind of like work together on it, it was like you were bringing the talent, and then I knew how to kind of polish it because I was putting the time in, right? You were in the suit and providing the cash to make sure those kids had the opportunity. But yeah, I mean, so
it wasn't cheap.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
Never is.
You guys better run a 4-4. Why don't we go with Cav?
Hey, listen, I got receipts, and I still believe I have a check that I never cashed, just out of being the goodness of my heart. Out of the goodness of my heart.
That's good. If I could use that money.
Yeah, check that balance sheet. All right, so
that's funny.
All right. Well, like at SSI, like on the surface, it was a speed institute, right? It brought people in at the top of the funnel for speed. You want to get faster, you come work with us. We were able to do that at the Olympic level. We've done it at the NFL Combine level. We could probably do it in all sports, right? And if you look at like, there's 4 physical qualities, like strength, speed, flexibility, and endurance, right? And then you could kind of break that down into any type of those are the 4 physical qualities. But when you look at like sport, speed becomes like the real game changer. Like that's the gap, right? You could strength is the gap at the earlier on, because you could easily overpower people outside of the technique, right? The longevity to the sport is purely at the technical level, technical and tactical, like the strategy and the tactics combined. But if you really want to like separate yourself, it really became that kind of speed at the high school, college level, and awareness level, right? And the talent identification side. So that's kind of where we had like this kind of front end offer to bring people in. And we were also able to kind of have kind of that like little measuring contest of like, we're better than everyone else. Like we're not going to even have the debate around, how you do things. It's like, look, at the end of the day, we're faster than you. We're better than you. And we understand the skill of the sport. So we're not limited to the specificity of speed at the general level. We're specifically gearing that to what they need at the technical level. And when you're able to do that, you could really see some huge improvements. So that was kind of like the model there. The business didn't need pro athletes to build awareness. We already had that. Like we had our entire business was high performers. We didn't have adult fitness. We didn't have fat loss challenges. We weren't running boot camps. We were training the most elite athletes in sport in the local area. We were putting, 300 to 500 kids into college a year. We would have signing classes that were like 80 kids per sport. It's like, that was huge. Nobody was doing that. I think we were able to do that, not because of the talent that we were in. I grew up in Miami. Like I grew up in Dade County. I still have my damn, 305 number, which was my old pager number. I've kept it, same number. I grew up in like hotbed of football, right? Not this like New Jersey
Dade
bullshit, like all that crap. Yeah. It's not like New Jersey bullshit, like football. It's none of that crap.
Listen, you're preaching to the choir, bro. And
I
support all the
We're
time
on the same page.
And we've had him on the show.
We have
before,
1 to your 10. We have 1 to your 10.
We've had him on. Like one of my best friends is a Jersey. He relocated down there. Now he's the head coach at American Heritage and Plantation, right?
Oh yeah.
So we're talking about like Dade County, Broward County. Like these guys are different, right? So you ain't got to preach to the choir about Jersey ball against that. Right?
I'm just gonna get a bunch of hate from all my guys. Yeah.
Yeah, the state champ, Bergen Catholic from Jersey, went down there to play Chaminade last year, lost by 60. So
yeah, I was the linebackers coach at Chaminade when we were number 2 in the state. Yeah,
but that's a whole nother podcast. I get it.
Well, fun fact: when I was the linebacker coach at Chaminade, like I had 5 linebackers that went to ACC or SEC, and we played a 4-3. Right. I literally Malik was on the bench and he ended up going to Clemson. Like he was on the bench.
Like your backup. I mean, we talk about it all the time in the recruiting world, right? Like look, if you're from, the Northeast, like, you know what I mean? Like you're not coming to the Northeast to get a corner, right? Or you're not coming to the Northeast to get one of those guys that are, that type of player, right? Mm-hmm. So do I go, if I'm like, say Rutgers or UConn or Syracuse, or like, I'm going to go down to Dade or Broward and I'm going to recruit the 4th best corner on the team because he's still a Division Division I player here. He might not be a 5-star or a Division I guy down there, but up here, that guy can play better than most of these corners or DBs, right?
And I would argue, first of all, UConn have a football team or no?
I think they're still FCS.
I'm just kidding. So, with Tim Willman and those guys are going to kick my ass being UConn guys.
We're the kings of basketball. That's our claim.
Hey, so
look, I'll take it. Men's and women's, take it.
Yeah. So, but if you think about that, one of the reasons why they go down to South Florida is I don't think that they're very well coached. They're not very polished. So if you go to like Northeast, like where I'm in, like in Virginia,
you're getting this.
You're getting guys that are hard worker. They're trained. They're coached.
Yep, blue collar, tough. Like they understand the game of football. I mean, listen, it's literally the conversation that I've had with my buddy. Right? He's like, if you could take the coaching from the Northeast, put it down here with these guys, unstoppable, right? Which is something that it's like, like the
and I think that's where
add the other stuff to it.
Yeah. So and that's where like from a talent identification standpoint, you see those guys and you're like, okay, if I could polish this, I know what I could do. There's opportunity there. So.
Correct.
So like the lid, like their ceiling in South Florida is like much higher just because they haven't been coached at that level and they just all raw skill. They also haven't been in the weight room. So you're dealing with guys that are like speed driven, they're skill driven, but they're not really well coached. So they have instincts, but they don't have systems.
Correct.
They have speed, but raw athleticism, but not actually like formal weight room structure strength, right? I had farm boy strength. I didn't lift until I really got to college. And I didn't like, that's one of the reasons, like, I didn't realize how strong I actually was because I was my dad lifted his entire life. So his body was beat up. So he almost didn't let us lift. So I was just like I was a raw athlete, didn't really train. So once I got into college, I was like, my bench, my first year, I was like, I got bucketed for 225 for 2 reps. By the end of my freshman year, I did it 22 times. And it's just because it's like the first time I was consistently under a bar. But
So you know what's really interesting? So like I've talked to Derek about, I mean he's from North Jersey, so he knows it. But what was interesting is like when you came up in the speed and strength world was right when I was starting to like transition out of it in the last few years.
Yeah, you were already in it early.
Yeah, I was in it really early, and like Bill Parisi and all. But you were like really. Then there was same time Joe DeFranco.
Yeah.
And the next gen was like Scott Paltos and you.
Scott, yeah.
Right. Like you guys were like the next gen, and I had guys with Scott, and I had guys with you, and I see similar. I mean, obviously everybody's slightly different, but there was similarities from like a core standpoint of development of speed and strength and the understanding of how important speed was. But you probably see this now, and I don't know how like you work with a lot of high level guys, you go down to Jamaica, you work, you had a guy, I think made the finals, the 100-meter dash Olympics, last Olympics. Then you have the guy who's the world champion, the Special Olympics world champion, right?
Paralympic. Paralympic. Nick Mayhew, 100, 200, and then the 4. Yeah, he's doing well. He's got world championships coming up in Kobe now. Jason Rogers from St. Kitts, 100-meter runner, and then Johan Blake's from Jamaica as well.
Johan Blake, right? Yeah. So talk about those guys were all like there was a lot of there was a good core of those guys in New Jersey, maybe some in South Florida or that area, out in California in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the next generation, like you guys, where you guys took it and ran with it. And then after that, though, it started to die, right? Like there aren't that many guys like you around anymore, right? Like Bill Parisi probably just speaks mostly now, is my guess. Tess probably still does some stuff. But
plus he's also like, he's franchised his whole kind of gig across the nation, right? Like he kind of took that model. Not saying it's right or wrong, but that was just the way. I mean, look, when I was coming up, Bill Parisi was the guy running our warm-up.
He was the guy, yeah.
Like he was running our warm-up at camps, though, right?
That's
he's out there bounding and doing all this stuff.
Right.
And then as I progress to the point now, and it's like, hey, now he's all buttoned up, kind of. I mean, he still gets down with it and like the nitty-gritty, but like that was his evolution. Now he's got a facility here. He's got one here. He's got it there. It's just a different track.
Yeah.
Talk about how that world, so that the experts in it have lessened, and maybe why you think that is not what it once was, as far as from a learning standpoint, because we see it in New Jersey, like without a lot of those core guys there, there's only a few guys that you can really trust in that area to develop you. Talk about what the knowledge requirements are that are different that you learned that made you so good versus what you see nowadays in that area.
Yeah, I think number one, I think the industry expands and contracts over time. And what I've taught people is like, as long as you stay in it. So even if you're not the best, when you stay in it, when it goes to expand, you're at the top of it. So it expands with you and it compounds and then it contracts. And if you stay in it, you're now at the next layer. And crazy thing to think about, Scott Pautos, Rick Sidiv, Martin Rooney, and Joe DeFranco were in the same building and started with Bill Parisi.
Correct.
So just go back to history and think about that, right? Like I've known Martin.
We were all like in that building, right? And they each had their own like Bill was the overarching guy, but Rooney had his group, right? Like Rooney did his thing, DeFranco did his, and then it's just, I mean, look, you talk about coaches and coaching trees, right? Same type of thing when it comes to this world, right? Like Bill created a great model, and then these guys took it and ran with it, and it's like they still all communicate today.
Yeah, and it's nuts to think about, like where they've all gone. Like if you think about it, like we've stayed in it long enough. Rick is still there. He wasn't like the earlier guys. He's older than all of us, but he was one in the next group. But he's still at the flagship Parisi building, still coaching. Martin, has kind of built his brand called Training for Warriors, and then has done that, and he's become a great author and speaker as well. And he's an incredible presenter. Scott is, just depending on, the cycle of his life of what he's doing, but whether he's ripping the laces off of baseball, or, or under a bar. Right. And then like, I brought Scott down to like work with our guys to give him some work because he's had that experience. And I always pull from them. I think that the biggest thing that separates that group is two things. Number one, this eager and willingness to learn.
Yep.
Like we were, and because we also had that, we had this ego to where we were like highly, accountable, and we just took ownership, and we said, and we kind of had an ego that was like, we're better than you. Like everyone was talking shit, like, and it was okay. It's not like you're talking crap nowadays and then people whine and complain. I'm not like trolling you on social media. I'm telling you, like, we're doing this right there.
It was almost like a boost, right? Like, hey,
of
man,
course,
let's all.
Yeah, if you're doing this wrong, let me show you how to do this, right? Yeah, I mean, there was only a handful of people, that were doing it. And then, like, talking about like early of adopters, right? You look at, Dave, you had a Combine DVD before there was Combine DVDs.
That's true.
Joe's Combine DVD was on a VHS, right? And it's just, I think it's different. I will also say, like, nowadays you need one player to open up a facility.
That's the
so you need like one name and then you're good to go. I mean, I would always like go like, man, that's weird. Like this session had 15 NFL guys in this session.
Right.
Like, that's what we're doing on a day. And that's somebody's entire career. So a lot of it was like volume, right? I think, Dave, if you've ever calculated how many guys you've evaluated just at the combine level, right? So you think about that number. Like I remember, like I worked with Nike when we did the Spark Challenges and the combines and all of that stuff. We got paid by way of documentation before and after. So like we had to have results. So our audit, in order to like submit anything, was attached to a number. So we had to learn how to keep track of athletes. And I remember, like, by the time 2008 or 9 came around, I had 50,000 guys that I had like tracked. Like when you just think about that number, it's absurd. But we had to literally on an Excel spreadsheet, it was tracked. And nowadays, like, that was 20 years ago. So
yeah, and there's no Spark. Like it's so interesting because I remember when Spark came out.
Yeah,
and then they killed it, right? They basically sold it off or killed it or whatever. I thought that was all part of the revolution. And then obviously our combines were huge during that time period. That was all part of like the revolution of like speed development. And me and Derek were just talking about this the other day. Well, what's happened, and I don't know if there's a transition in the college talk because I definitely want to talk to you about it because I want to get all your insights on this. But today, because they want to play 7-on-7, and we run a 7-on-7 club, right? And they want to play 7-on-7. Linemen have less things to go to as a whole. people don't go to combines like our combine business, which was obviously once the bread and butter of everything we did. I mean, it's just about gone, right?
Because kids do not want to be exposed.
Correct.
Whereas back then,
they needed it.
Here's the thing: is like we would set it up. Like one of the things that I think people don't realize is, Dave, myself, Tony, like guys in the beginning, we protected players if they got screwed, if they had a bad day. Now they're basically exposing them. Like our mentality was like, you come to the camp, we're going to give you an evaluation. If you shit the bed, like no one knows about it. If you
right. Because the only people that know are the people that were like here.
Exactly.
Right?
So we
and now they post
guys.
Everything. They post. Yeah. I used to say
everything.
like we used to tell them, hey, listen, if you don't want to post it, just tell us on the way out. Or just shoot us a quick email. And to this day, like I won't, like people are like, why don't you post the results? I'm like, I'm not going to post the kids' results unless you really want me to post the results. You tell me to post it, I'll post it. I'm glad to post it. But like, I don't want you going there and getting locked on. Like, I'll send this out to the coaches, you know what I mean? But I don't want you to get locked on to, I ran a 4.7, 2 years ago, right? And so that was the thing that you're right. And that was part of, I had this beef with, and I obviously as a track guy, I think the only timing that really matters is FAT. Okay.
Yeah. You're like 100 meter. Let's go.
Yeah. 100 meter. Let's go. If you want to time,
were you running 100 meters or like 100 yards? I didn't know back then. Were you like, what age grade? Like what did it convert over?
Yeah.
Just checking.
And you're not that far behind. So I know you're in your 40s. So easy. But,
get him in when you can, bro.
And you got a little guy around my age. Wait, no, how old's your little guy?
He's going to be 7 next in a week.
There, Dave, right there.
Okay, so mine's 1 year older.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
That's right, because I remember it was all around that same time period. But yes, I'm old. I'm old. I'm grandpa dad. So, but what's interesting about is FAT, right? Which obviously because you work with track, as you know, that's really the gun to the electronic timing is really the true time.
You're getting a picture, man. It's like there, boom.
So now they have the systems that are quote unquote better, like laser timing, but
I can tell you insights to NFL combine systems. Like that's easy. I could go back. We could go all day. Listen, let me cut the chase right here. Let me just throw it. Look, I've been in the NFL combine business for too freaking long. All right. About a good 8-9 years ago, it became the ratings plummeted. And then you had shoe companies that sponsored, and you guys could go back and fact check me. Shoe companies sponsored the combine. And they had to pay for it so they would actually run it. It's actually not ran and managed by the NFL. A lot of people don't understand some of these dynamics. Yes, it's all curated and they are in charge, like at the end of the day, but it's a ratings thing. And in that window, right, during that window, it needed to be marketed. So you're not really getting really good marketing numbers if people are running shit times. So there was a single year where you could go back and look and you could video analysis a test. And you could see a kid that runs a 4.5 and you look at it and it's on a video, it's like a 4.8. And then you wonder why he like had a great combine or he dropped in the draft, right? It's because there's no coach that I know that I respect that is going to go to bat in that war room for a guy that he didn't pull the trigger on the clock.
Right.
If he didn't pull the trigger on the clock, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. There's a reason, why Belichick's at the 10. There's a reason why coaches are got their stopwatch. Because if there wasn't a reason, they would just wait for the results. They would look the kid run and be like, I like the way that kid moves. What was his number? I like the way because that's all you have to do. You have to see the way the kid moves and then look at the number. But if they don't trust that number, why should you?
Correct.
And if you actually go back, and we had to do this a lot with like defending our guys, because some of the guys would, not be happy about certain numbers, and you'd be like, boom, like you go to a pro day and you start to see how like the discrepancies of like what the Raiders got a kid timed at versus Jacksonville, and you're just like,
different.
How the fuck did they get this kid clocked at 4.9 and the same kid clocked at 4.4? And you're like, what the heck's going on? So yeah, the combine business it's a marketing business at this day and age, right? So you have to be very tactful to do it. You have to understand, like if you're an agent, you have to be talking to teams and director of, you gotta talk to people that really know what they're doing. You need to not be a salesman. You need to understand like what's going on. You need to know football. There's too many agents that don't know football, and they get shunned in those conversations because like it's like, all right, you're having a business conversation instead of having a football conversation, and then you get bucketed. So yeah, the combine space is just all marketing. Generally, you're going to see kids move a certain way, and you're going to see, relatively good numbers, but there are some things that are a little bit funny. And that's why, in track and field, it's really, really difficult to have like great discrepancies because it's gun to photo.
Right. It's gun to photo. And that's could you imagine if they did gun to photo on these 40 times?
You might as well just take a calendar out and start timing with that, because people are going to. So I'll tell you, here's the thing, you're a track guy. I was a track guy. Like I was a decathlon, but I also ran like the 100, 110 hurdles. Like that was my jam, right? I had insane acceleration. That's where I was strong. I was getting out of the box. I ran at the University of Miami Combine going into as a sophomore. I ran a 4.62 and a 4.58, both hand and laser timed. I got a call like, hey, you want to talk about it? I was so embarrassed about a 4.6 because I thought that was slow, because I grew up in Miami in a track space. That's so slow when you think about that. But if you actually think about that in a national level, at a linebacker, I played at 235. Like that's not slow at all.
Nope.
Right.
But in Miami, I might be one of the slowest guys. But when you start getting out of that environment, right, the minute you go out of South Florida and you move up, once you get out of Orlando, right, when you're in Orlando up, like that's no longer fast anymore. And now it's not a fast environment. Now you are so much faster than everyone else. I didn't know what was fast because of my environment was so much faster than me.
Right. You were always in a fast environment.
So like I would tell people like I don't want my numbers posted. Like, are you kidding me? I ran like 4.6. That's slow as shit. Because I'm playing against guys that are like, literally burning me. And and that's a different level. Because I ran, 10.8s consistently, right? Like 10.2 doesn't win the state in high school. That's crazy. Now, those are Olympic numbers, but you don't realize, there's a difference in like senior level people where like they run it on a regular basis. And there's a massive gap between like a 10.3 and a 9.9. Like that's insanely different. People just don't realize the difference. But I think a lot of people don't know, and parents don't know. They're uneducated.
Parents definitely don't know.
Coaches don't know, so it just feeds into a worse system. So back then, we were educating people, we were protecting kids. We also had a lot of fun, right? We got our hands dirty a little bit with it. But nowadays, I think that it's gotten so far away from that, and coaches aren't developing players at all. Like they're just not developing players. Like I would say 10 years ago, the worst coach position in college or at the high school level has to be wide receiver. Nowadays, it's actually getting significantly better. The wide receiver position coaching is so much better than what it used to be. But back then, it was horrible. Like guys couldn't even run a slant.
And I think it's because there's a little bit, I think personally, like with that, the way the game has changed and the way that passing has now become more of a pivotal role, right? More receivers on the field at once, more guys coach. Like everybody thinks like, hey, okay, so if there's more of that position, I need to have a better coach at that, right? It's also one of those things that you can market and do, right? And train those guys as a receiver coach a little bit easier than some of these other positions where, hey, and we talk about it all the time, good, bad, indifferent. Like, hey, these guys go out there and you have some receiver coaches that are excellent, right? They understand the craft. They understand the whole thing. Then you have some of these guys that are out there with cones doing all this stuff that's like, what are we talking about, dude? But hey, I got to train. This kid paid for an hour. I got to come up with shit to do for an hour. So, okay, let's make 75,000 cuts and then we'll do that. Okay, and then we'll do it. And then look, watch, we'll put it on video and now we can market it even more so, right?
I mean, look, let me break down wide receiver play for everybody right now because I can't stand this. It's so freaking simple. If you want to make a cut, there's two cuts, right? Like you're going to run basically a speed cut where you're cutting on the outside leg going to the outside, or you're breaking. That break is basically vertical at 45 or it's coming back. That's it.
That's it.
So outside of the speed cut, which you have to be prepared for, and you have to be almost a smaller, like weighted body. Like you can't have too much weight on you. Fun fact is, like if you look at like Chad Johnson's career, Ocho Cinco, where he got hurt is when he put too much weight on as a receiver.
Correct.
Because he wasn't able to do what he was doing best, which is making cuts on a dime. Like he got full speed, he just stopped vertically.
Right.
He couldn't do that. Right. So that's one option. The other option, which is the most common route, right, where you're at some point cutting vertical or cutting back, all you need to do is look at Allen Iverson and watch a crossover. That crossover
100%.
cut is the only thing you need to learn as a receiver.
We talk about it all the time, bro. Like
the other thing is getting off the line.
That's what it is, right? Like receiver play at the line of scrimmage is one-on-one in basketball, right? Like where am I trying to go? If I'm bringing the ball up as a point guard, I'm trying to go that way to the basket, right? It's if I'm a receiver and I line up, I'm trying to go vertical towards the end zone. Not all this whatever.
Yeah, and you want to get into, like, if I were getting into recruiting right now and I was doing development and recruiting, I'm going to get freaking undersized point guards that 100%. Are more physical, and I'm turning them into DBs, and I'm making them all play corner.
And nobody wants to play defense. How many times we talk about it, Dave? We go to combine showcases now. We have 45 receivers and we have 4 DBs because nobody wants to be exposed. Right. And what they also don't understand is, and we go back and forth with it all the time. It's like everybody wants to score touchdowns and do all this kind of stuff, but it's like there's only one football. How many targets are you really going to get a game? Whereas you go play DB, you're probably on the field for 3 snaps every series, right? It's like, it's just these little things that everybody just wants to be in the limelight, and everybody forgets there's only one football.
Well, look, and the NFL portrays that a little bit too. And because if you look at the draft.
Look at the contracts. It's simple. Look at the contracts. Guys getting ridiculous contracts.
Players went in the front end of the draft.
I think it was the first. I think the first defensive guy was picked somewhere around like 14, 15.
It's crazy.
Right. So they're basically saying that like they're putting their hands up as far as trying to get the right guy in to cover people, and they're saying these guys are almost all the same. They can't cover. They can't cover anybody. And all I need to do is get a guy who can get open on routes, a guy who can deliver the ball, and then the tackle who can block the guy trying to rush to quarterback who's trying to get rid of the ball. Right?
That's all they're doing. If I'm a coach and I'm in charge, and again, it's from a philosophy standpoint, I'm really making sure that I have one lockdown corner. I want a career left tackle, and I want a Hall of Fame quarterback. If I have those 3 players, the rest of it is just working. Here's the reason why those are the only 3 players that I think.
And everybody's got to understand their role. Like not everybody is going to be that dude all the time. It's football.
Yeah, but if I have those 3 guys, you actually could play schemes, because if you have a man corner that could do his job, you could do a lot of stuff.
All good. Like that side, leave that side alone. I can do everything now.
And then you have to understand that as a guy that is that corner, when he gets older and he's no longer that guy, you have to give him a little bit of protection, and that's where I think coordinators get their egos and they lose a little bit. But if you have that, you have your Trent Williams, and then you have a quarterback. Right. The rest of that is basically just protecting your assets, right? So if you have a corner, you're protecting your assets as a D coordinator, because you can move things around based upon injuries and schemes and what you have. If you have a left tackle, you're protecting your biggest investment, which is the leader of your team, which is your quarterback. And if you have a quarterback that can run your show, you basically have an on-field coach that's going to drive the ball and not lose you the game. And again, I know there's philosophies to football, but at the end of the day, it's 11 guys on 11 guys, and it should be that simple. But we have taken some of the coaching out of it because the recruiting game, the NIL aspect of it, there is no offensive line that is being coached well at the college level at in a Power 5 world. You've lost it. It's crazy to me. So when you find a really good offensive lineman that's coached up well, it's great to see, because it's very, very rare right now to 100%. See offensive linemen that are actually really, really good. Right. You don't see it anymore. And if you don't think that's important, then why the hell did Jeff Saturday have the career he had? If you don't think that's important,
last night you were talking quarterback, and then what was the first other position drafted besides a quarterback? Offensive tackle, right? Offensive lineman. Those are the guys, and you work from the front back. And like you said, when you have those guys that are well coached, understand the game, and then supply it with all the other intangibles, that's where you can really kind of take that next step. Because like you said, protecting your asset. Okay, I just spent how much on my quarterback? Look at the New York Jets, right? They know that guy behind them, whatever's in front, they're not going to go through that again this year with that guy back there, right? So let's go pick up all these other guys in free agency. We're going to draft an offensive lineman high. That's where you need to spend your money.
And I think that for me,
NIL and transfer portal and how you think that's affecting like the development of players, because we talk about the negatives of it from a lot of times from oh, this guy's jumping here and it's the team and camaraderie, but talk about it from a like player skill wise and coach, how you think it affects coaching. Explain that, because I think that's an important thing.
I mean, look, I'm in business now, right? And my great grandmother was a seamstress and a hairdresser from Cuba, and she ran numbers for the mob. My dad's Irish, like kind of grew up in that environment. I would much prefer actually to go back to the way it was when the mafia of sports was running it, and it was illegal, but it was still done and no one knew about it or no one talked about it. Then everyone talking about it, and now it becomes this facade, because guess what? They're breaking the rules anyways. They were breaking the rules before. They're breaking the rules now. It's better off that they're actually doing it.
At least it's out in the open.
Yeah. Well, no, I actually think the opposite. I actually wish.
Oh, you wanted it to? You want to keep it like?
I would want to go back, because here's the reason why.
Duffel bags.
I actually like the duffel bag mentality, because what happens is the appreciation stays there. When
now
the duffel bag
expects it.
Exactly. So now that's my biggest thing, is because what you're doing at the cultural level is you're changing the expectation.
Yep.
And if you're basically saying, I know what you did and you know what you did, but we're just not going to talk about it. I got you. You got me. We're good. Now it's you owe me in order for me to go here. This is what I got. And now you're setting it up for failure, right? This is why a Nick Saban could sit in a house and say, you're only going to spend 2 years with me because I'm going to do what's best for you and your family for you to go get drafted.
Exactly.
Now, is it better for that kid to go there? Guys, the reason why we know about Oregon is because of TV.
Right.
And uniforms. Now they've lost that luster because every team has TV and every team has uniforms.
Yeah, now everybody has that.
Yeah, but that's the reason why. I mean, nobody knew who Marcus Mariota was. He played in some freaking all-star game in Texas one year, right? Against another quarterback.
Yeah, my all-star game.
You're damn right.
All-star game.
Exactly. So
with Johnny Manziel, which you were there for.
No free shout-outs. By the way, you talk about how a team runs a show as a coaching level, right? By the way, still the best warm-ups of all time, the all-whites, which I didn't get. I had the other ones. But the all-white warm-ups were the best. You look at the way that Texas team as coaching staff ran it versus kind of the other side of the fence.
Oh, yeah, Coach Dykes, yeah.
So different, right? And it's like, that's the system. So systems really, could recruit players. Systems could mold players. Now money's the thing that's recruiting players, potential options recruiting players. I think NIL personally, I don't think it's that good for the sport. It was going on before. I think that they've tried to do it right. I think that I would prefer NIL over the transfer portal. If I had to pick one, I would choose NIL. I think the transfer portal is horrible. And it's just because, look, I mean, I remember picking up, a coach that was with Urban Meyer, and he had literally a 3-ring binder of just SIM cards that he would have to just run through. I got a SIM card. This is gone. He got a SIM card. That one's gone. Like, that's back in the day. That's what they did because they had a limited amount of how many texts that they were allowed to send to players.
Yep.
That's the way it was, and that's so I don't really like it, but it's also like you got to learn the rules of the game. And
Correct.
If you're going to, I think people that are going to bitch about it are going to get their butts kicked. So I think at some point you have to just be like, hey, I know the rules of engagement. This is the way it's going to work, and that's the rules in which I have to play.
They all had the right mind. Like they all thought it was going to be like, all right, this guy will go here and he'll sign some autographs and he'll this.
No
and that.
chance.
Like, come on, man. Now we're talking about like your third string guard saying, hey, I need 100,000 or I'm leaving. Like,
I'll use this great analogy. This is the truth of it too, and you're dead on right on this, Derek. Dead on. Okay, when I was an NFL agent, the thing that used to drive me nuts when guys who they were in training, hadn't even got picked up, most likely were not going to get picked up, were asking to do appearances. And I'm like,
you're like, no one's going to come, dude. Like, no one's going to come.
For what? I set up at a bar. No one's coming to get you to sign anything. What are we talking about? You know,
I don't care how many IG followers you got. I don't care, like, you know what I'm saying? Like this now, that stuff has changed.
But the NFL had a nice pecking order on that.
Some of these guys,
It
guys are all
the parameter
smoke and nothing there, right? Like some of these guys are really good at, like, they're either good at it themselves, media and marketing, or they've surrounded themselves with a good team, media, marketing, that now you're creating like a smoke and mirrors type of effect. It's like, all right, well, this guy must be good because he's got this, he's showing that, like, right? Like all of his social media
that's
leans one way. It's like, dude, this guy can't even run.
I look at it like this, though. Like, okay, so there's two things. Because of your playing ability, you're getting NIL, right? Like you're talking about the other thing, which could happen, is the media side. You become a media star like the gymnast from LSU. Okay. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the female athletes, it's not just their ability, but also the media side.
That other side of it, right? Like they have to use that, to be honest. I mean, right? Like it's kind of like they need a little bit of this, a little bit of that, because they don't get.
No, I mean, like we can't be in denial. Like we understand that, like image sells, right? Like if you're good looking, you're gonna have an advantage,
right? What gets clicked on?
I just think that you are running into. It's just a slippery slope, right? We've already gone so far off of it that it's just you've lost it, right? And then at that level, you have
like even to rein this whole thing back now. You know what I mean? Like
right, like that game's gone. Now it's just a matter of like mitigating risk. Because at that point, right? I think right now we're just at risk mitigation. We're not actually going to change much. It's just like, okay, we effed up. The system screwed up. We're not going to be able to fix it. Right, how do we actually protect ourselves so it doesn't become a big problem? Because you're going to run into some massive issues eventually. And it's already there.
Issues. Employment. You're going to run into massive employment issues. What constitutes an employee of the university? If I'm making, let's not even talk football. Let's talk Caitlyn Clark of Iowa.
Sure.
She made $3 million in her career at Iowa. Okay.
Right. Way more than her freaking WNBA contract.
Right.
All right, well, let me interrupt you real quick. If that's the case with what you're about to say, if what makes her an employee, now the head coach of that team has to get paid more than her. Now, hold on, it gets even better. Because of the state law,
correct,
where they live, the state law, like if that was in Kansas, which I don't know Illinois, but if that's in Kansas, the athletic director has to get paid more than the coach.
Yeah,
they're not allowed.
Talking parameters, and that's before you even get into taxes or any of that.
The AD and the president of the university needs to have a hierarchy financially based upon their state law.
Right, because otherwise it's kind of like you have the inmates running the asylum, right?
Yeah, but if you have an player that's a state employee through the university, that then means they have to align their contracts accordingly.
Well, right. Well, so right now, according to NIL, obviously she's not an employee. She made that money. But the bottom line is eventually there's going to be an issue where, and this is going to it's probably happening already, but I get an NIL deal, okay, from somebody. Somebody breaks that contract one way, shape, or form. What my restitution is almost zero, right? Because if it's like some outside organization, it's going to be very difficult restitution wise. Lawyer goes and says, screw this.
Right.
He plays for the University of X. Mm-hmm. And you know what? The only reason he's getting that, was supposed to get this money, or he or she, whoever the lawyer, is because of the University of X. And University of X better fork that money over. And he technically is an employee of the University of X because he goes to school and they'll say, oh, his scholarship. Then they'll go back and forth. And eventually what's going to happen, you're going to find a state that is going to find that is an employee. Okay. There's 50 states in the union. One of them is going to find that eventually. Okay.
It's and I don't know. Yep.
It's going to be an issue. And,
guaranteed.
And all you need is a politician to say, I think that this is wrong for X. And I'm not on either side of this. I don't know what the right answer is, to be honest. Right. I really don't. So I'm not on either side of it, but I'm just thinking from a liability standpoint, how crazy is the liability financially on a university because of a collective, which is not representing the university, but is representing the university.
Right. There's been so much gray area.
It's such a gray area that you just need the right lawyer who knows the state laws, the employment laws, and have a state that has something in their law. Like every state's different, right? So they have something in their law where you technically, this cannot happen. Boom, that's the window of opportunity, blows the whole thing up. And now it becomes employees, which I think is not a bad thing. I think being employees would regulate it somewhat, even though I'm not, I'm kind of more on the side of a capitalist, meaning like it shouldn't have to be that way. But I do see both sides. This is one of these issues that I see both sides of the situation, and there's no exact resolution of it. But what's going to happen is the lawyers are going to figure out the way that there is going to have to be some level of resolution.
They're going to figure out whatever they need to figure out to make money.
They're going to make money, right? Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah, because if a lawyer said, look, and imagine a lawyer looking at it like, hey, if I get really good at this, like this is just the first step, right? Because now everybody's going to do it.
I'll represent everybody.
Everything's about money.
I will corner this market and I will make things happen.
Of course, right?
And you're already looking at some of the Ivy League schools have already done this, right? Like I think it was either Dartmouth or Cornell, one of their like basketball teams said, like, no, we're going this way with it. So it's already starting.
The other thing too, like from an NIL standpoint, like they need to, if they're smart about it, they need to start assigning the payouts to the contracts around timing. So I would do all payouts attached to post transfer portal dates.
Right. Well, and that's the other part that's always when we put people on here, right? Like the schedule, right? Like you got transfer portal stuff going on with bowl season and recruiting, right? Like I would attach payouts to. I would do a signing bonus for an NIL kid. I would do a monthly base retainer so they could feel it, so they don't forget, right? And it's requiring touch points. So for a few $100s, they have to do a check-in or a post. Yep. And that's how their contract should be written. I would attach their bigger payouts to their signing bonus agreement or whatever that is. Absolutely.
To post-transfer date, post-portal date closures. And then I would attach their bigger dates to post-bowl game appearances.
Yep. To hold them accountable to participate.
I'm creating again. How do you fix this?
And they won't sign it. I wouldn't sign it. So like you got it from the player side. I'm not signing that.
All right, go somewhere else. You got $50,000 gig.
Yeah, right, but you're gonna find something that will.
Be like, sorry,
if you're that good. The second tier, the third tier guys, like
we don't need to worry about the guys that are that good. The guys that are that good were already doing this shit way before.
Right. We already know how to
agree.
That,
I have friends of mine that got cars and trucks from sucking, and they had one good game.
You're like, come on, dude. Like Reggie Bush just got his Heisman back. We've been doing this for a while. Like,
this is not new.
Absolutely.
You're like Neon Bodo got this in champs a while ago.
Look, let's just kind of like back up here. I feel confident in my ego to say I had really good talent identification, right? Number two, I knew my role, right? Like, so I knew my role as an athlete. I knew my role as a coach. So I don't get out of my line. I know what that is. And then because of that, like I'm talent identifying things. I'm able to see good people. I'm also able to see opportunities. I know my role, so I know how I work in those environments. And then I believe that I'm going to outwork people. This is the same thing in my playing career. It's the same thing in coaching. It's the same thing in business. Nobody understands that all you're doing is transferring high skill that you've worked a lot of time in to something else, and then has a compounding effect. Dave's talent identification has inside information for freaking 4 to 8 years of a high school kid to a college kid because he knows what that kid did. So when he's picking a kid and goes, hey, I think this Edmonds kid could be the dude, right? And he picks that kid, and now he goes, look, this is the reality. It's him, and he's got two brothers that are both going to be first-round draft picks. This kid would have been a top-tier draft pick if he didn't get hurt. You train him, you get him healthy, he would have been a draft pick. The kid didn't even have a strong playing career in college. Correct. And he played how many years in the NFL? 4, 5, 8 years?
No, I think
he just retired last year.
Just last year. So it was 2019 he went in. So I guess 5, 6 years? 6 years. Yeah.
So I think 18.
That's what's funny. His father said if you can get him in, he said he's gonna be at least 5 years and maybe a 10-year player. And you agreed with it too. I remember you. Yeah.
And I think it's also interesting because like I remember saying this. I was like, dude, this kid's an incredible linebacker, but he's always had the ball in his hands. People don't remember, like, he was an all-American linebacker. They just had a bunch of guys get hurt at Virginia Tech, so they gave him the ball.
That's what he really should have been doing.
Just talk about this? We were just talking about this the other day, talking about how, like, you know, because I had heard LaDainian Tomlinson was on a podcast, and he's like, I didn't play running back until I was, you know, he went the other way. He was like, I didn't play running back until I was a junior in high school. You know, like, these guys play different positions. They're just as good at the other one if they had pursued that.
I was a quarterback, and I was a quarterback, and I used to train with Ken Dorsey. Kid Ricky Love was like the ball boy at the University of Miami, and he was like friends with them. I used to go train with Ken Dorsey when I was in high school. Most underrated college quarterback of all time. Right? Great, like systems guy. Figured it out. I think he's awesome. But anyways. So I used to go train with him when I was in high school, and everyone's like, "Oh man, you're great, you're great." Listen, and I could chuck the shit out of a football. Like but when I had a shoulder, I could throw the piss out of it. And
hey, I was a high school quarterback too, bro. Receiver, DB, and that was one of the, like, me going into college. It was like, all right, well, what position are you going to pick? This school wanted me to do this. And for me,
I knew really early on. I started as a freshman as a varsity quarterback, and I knew really early on. The next year, like my sophomore year, I literally told the coach, I was like, "Hey, I got to wear 57 if I'm going to play quarterback." And he's like, "What?"
I did the same thing. I said,
I have to play. I have to wear. My favorite football player is Dwight Stevenson. He was an offensive center, Hall of Famer in '98. And I literally said, I have to wear number 57. I wear number 11. And I said, I have to wear number 57 if I'm going to play quarterback, coach. And he's like, "Why?" He's like, "I'm going to play linebacker." That much fun.
I was not playing it.
Because he didn't want his quarterback to go both ways, and I was like, "That's what's happening," you know.
Well,
so
I also knew,
I did
like,
it,
you know,
and I just played linebacker.
It was for me, like, you know, all right, well, look, I'm a 5'8", like, receiver. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna be asked to go across the middle and basically get my ass kicked every day, right?
I like people like you. Oh my God,
packages am I gonna be in? How many targets am I actually gonna get? Like, you know, and I love playing special teams, and I'm like, all right, well, offensive guys, most college coaches lean towards defensive guys to play special. I'm like, look, I'm going to play defense. That way I can run around for 3 downs, play all my special teams, because as a high school player at a small school up here in North Jersey, like, I never left the field from the time I was a freshman to the time I was a senior. So now I was used to that. Now you're asking me to come play one way. Like, that was tough. So how can I get on the field as much as possible? And I think a lot of these guys now, that transition, they don't get that part of it, right? Like, the whole, listen, you may have been the best player on your team, but now you're going to college and everybody is the best player.
Of course.
To a whole nother level, right?
Guys, there's levels to this, man. At the end of the day, like, I see some of the guys that work with now, like, they're freaks.
Yeah.
Like, they're just straight freaks.
Dave and I were
there's
just having this conversation.
I always say there's levels of freaks.
Right.
Like,
even there's guys in the league that
right.
are, you know what I mean? Like, look, there's freaks, then there's okay, he's even more of a freak. And then it's like, look, now you got, like, super freaks. Like,
well, yeah. So, like, you look at the Edmonds brothers, and, like, obviously the youngest one's a monster. Last year, it was pretty funny. Last year, I'm working with, or 2 years ago, I'm working with Chase Young, and we're getting work in, and he needed to come off the ball, like, just to get used to some stuff. So I just short set him. I get in the tackle stance, and I just short set him. And he looks at me and he goes, "Oh shit, coach, I didn't know you could do that." I'm like, back in the day. So he gets excited. He's like, he saw me, like, I had a little punch him right there, and I look good. He gets excited. He's like, "Oh, I can get some work here. This is gonna be fun." Right. You've been busting my ass.
There's different levels, dude.
This man grabbed me, and he like, little thud. I looked at him. I said, "You fucking do that shit again, I'm gonna throw an elbow at you right now. Don't ever touch me like that again, because I'm not doing that." Like, I'm not getting hit by him. And you can say this all you want.
Like, you're a top 3 pick.
It doesn't matter. Like, as much as I love to say, like, yeah, I can handle myself, I'm not letting that man hit me. It's not happening. He does that to me again. I promise you, I'm gonna slip and throw an elbow right to his jaw. That's just what's gonna happen. Because that's the only way this is gonna be fair. You know?
Yeah, no, it's there's definitely.
We just had to, Dave. Who are we talking about? LeVar Arrington, right?
Oh, monster.
Yeah. I would say
Penn State.
Well, that's my story of, like, so I LeVar doesn't pick up my call anymore, but LeVar and I back there in the combines, we talk, and at the NFL combine we had breakfast, and we're walking out, and like, I'm a good sized guy, I mean, but he was every bit of 6'4" and a V shape,
Yes, yeah.
But he's not young. Like, he's a few years younger than me, but not maybe 4 or 5 years younger, but not much younger than me, right? And I was just like, wow. I'm like, Like I always considered myself like a really good athlete, had some freakish things I could do. But this guy was a freak of freaks. Like like just not just athletically, because he used to jump like as fast as I was, he ran the 100 meters faster. You know what I mean? And he's bigger.
Like
So
those guys that came off the board last night are on a different level, right?
Well, like
when
you
we
look at
evaluate the
LeVar. Yeah, LeVar, Dave, like coached the camps with us. He coached at my camp, coached the camps with us.
Right.
Sometimes you get in there, and I would watch him coach, and I'd look at him. By the way, you can't tell LeVar anything, right? And I looked up to him, so I wanted to like admire him. But I look at him like, what the hell are you teaching? He's like, you got to do this. You got to do that. I said, you don't understand. No one could do that. I played the same fucking position.
Nobody
Your arms are
that.
a foot and a half longer. You're the only one that could do that.
Right.
And a good friend of mine.
They have a play named after him, the LeVar Leap. I mean, he used to jump over the top and tackle people.
But he used to teach drills, and I'll be like, LeVar, nobody could do that. Your arms are 6 inches longer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like when you get the it's like when you get like, you know, like say even when you get like a high school coach to come down and coach the youth kids, right? And it's like they can't do that stuff yet. Like, or you know what I mean? Like it's just a different
right.
It's kind of just like, too, to be honest, like one of the other things that my buddy at American Heritage just said, he goes, look, just because you played in the NFL doesn't mean you can coach at a high level.
No.
Most of those guys to him are just, you know, look, they understood their role. They were really freaking good at whatever, but like to teach it, to coach it, it takes a totally different type of person. Not everybody's, you know,
you got to be empathetic. You got to be empathetic to the fact that a person, you have to be able to develop
those certain things
that they may not be able to do what you could do. So you have to think about it as what can they do and how do I get them to be able to develop that maybe they could do X, right?
Right.
And that's the hardest thing. Like when you're a great player, like even that was my hardest thing from when I
mean, how many times do we talk about high school corners? Like, you know, how do we talk about high school corners being able to cut? Like they don't really know how to play corner, but they've always gotten away with it because they're just so fast, right? Or they're just so athletic.
Yeah. I mean, like at the high school level, if you could teach kids to move their hands and feet and not play with their body
and just go 100% effort all the time, you're probably going to win games.
Yeah, if you could just teach the kid, well, you're also going to set them up for success because you're teaching them to move like hands and feet. Right. When, you know, I mean, I probably didn't even have to use my arms 90% of the time in high school because I'm going to just put my head through your chest. I'm going to knock you out. Like,
absolutely.
That's what I was able to do until you find a guy at the college level that they just bounce off of you. Right?
It's like, he can do that too. Okay.
I mean, for me, playing on the inside, like because of my speed, they wanted to move me outside and back to playing safety,
right.
and I'm like,
and you probably would have been an outside guy if you had played in defenses now.
Yeah, nowadays, yeah, but like for me, I'm like, wait a second, like I don't feel comfortable in this much space, right? So, but if I'm on the inside, I'm getting down blocked by a 6'5", like a 6'4", 6'5", 330 tackle. I don't have the leverage that they're teaching basically to lift and rip around. I got to beat them to the hole, right?
Yep.
But
Which is where this starts to come in too.
Yeah. So, but if I have instincts and I hit a hole like a running back should hit it,
right?
I'm actually breaking
those guys there. Yeah.
But I'm breaking schemes, so that doesn't work well for a coach.
Well,
so a coach doesn't like
that. I had a kid, Derek knows because he was from that era. I had this kid's name was Anthony Pomo. He ran track at UConn. He was 5'9", 140 pounds. He was a quarterback for us, actually. He was lightning. But when he used to play corner, it was funny because, you know, like we used to teach him the back pedal and stuff. Anthony would stand there, and we played when I first started coaching, it was a small school. Derek played at a small school too, so did I. And it was a small school, and he was definitely more athletic than probably everybody he played against, other than maybe the kids from Paris and Catholic. But he was definitely even faster than them. He was state 100-meter champ. So
yeah, he was lightning.
He was lightning, and he was just a great athlete. But he said to me, he goes, I can cover these guys without backpedaling.
Right, like I don't have to do that.
And he said, can I turn, like you see a lot of guys in college now are turned, their back is to the sidelines because they want to see. He said, can I just look inside to see run and pass? Because and not play like square or anything like and you see a lot of the faster guys now turn completely my back to the sidelines because if I could see really clearly if it's run and pass, I'm fast enough that if I make a mistake, I can recover.
Yeah, I got makeup speed.
They might I can do it and I'll pick it, which used to happen. He used to do crazy shit. Like shit that and I was a DB coach at the time, shit that I'd be like, No, none of you should. You guys are all good athletes. None of you.
Yeah, but nobody. You're
do
not doing
look
that,
over
dude.
there.
Like,
what he's doing.
That's okay.
He's going to get away with it. Okay, you do that. That's 6
you're
points.
not.
Yeah, that's 6 points. But it's interesting because that's how I do. That was the first time I saw. I say, okay, that's how a great athlete could and there are guys much better than him, right? Could go through his career and be such a good athlete without having to really hone in on certain things, right? And then when they have to teach it to others, that's how a pro player could have a hard time teaching, because I used to do this and this and this. And those 5 guys over there, they're good athletes, but they can't do any of it,
Yep.
and then they can't understand it. So the guys who have empathy, and I want you to expand this, because this goes into what you're doing now with businesses and individuals, right? The empathy and understanding of what people need to get there, that understanding, and maybe they can get that skill set, right? But it's a different path for them to get to that skill set, right? There are kids or our athletes, and same thing in business, right? I may not be a genius, okay? How does a person that's not as smart as Elon Musk become successful? Well, there's loads of them, right? Like I always say, like, listen, some of the wealthiest people I know, like, own construction companies, and they're builders, right? They're not geniuses.
One of my mentors is a plumber.
Right. They figured out in their niche what they did well, and then they leverage it. Talk about what individuals, and obviously you work with businesses too, but obviously it still comes down to individuals. What are the things that people have to do and understand in order to become successful?
Yeah, I would say same as sports, right? Number one rule, like, you have to have know who you are, right? So you have to have self-awareness. That's number one. Okay. Number two is you have to know who you are, and then number two, you have to know your role. Okay. So if you understand your skill sets and your abilities, it would be you're going to have a lot of success, understanding like where you fit within that environment. After you understand how you fit in that environment, then it's a matter of like the actual situational awareness, right? So self-awareness, social awareness, situational awareness. Same thing in sports. Knowing who you are, your skills, your abilities, how that fits within the role, and then also how you need to adapt and show up for that circumstance. Dave, knock me out and then bring me back in.
Oh, why did I lose you?
I'm frozen.
You're you look very handsome though, Frozen.
And you got a thumb out, so it actually is a pretty good shot.
Let me kick you out. I'll kick you out. I'll remove you. Let's see. How do I do it? Kick you out of here. Kick from studio. Kick him out and let him come back in. Derek, by the way, that's the funniest thing ever that when it happens. But there's still nothing funnier than when it happened to even though I felt bad for him. And he was
Tony.
Oh man, Tony was so mad. So mad.
He might still be on the rails.
He might be on the rails about that, you think?
I think it bothers him more than it bothered us.
And you know what's funny? The person who thought it was funny, but he did want to laugh, because you just know how he. I know Nippius wanted to just start chuckling because he would make it up. Tony's back. I just know, like he said to me, you got we do have to have a podcast for Tony. Getting Tony back because
he'd go. Right, he would go once a week if we wanted to.
I listen. Tony could be like his own.
Like I guarantee you, if we put it out there, like, hey, you want to have like a weekly spot to come in and talk, like, I mean, because he'll just talk. I mean, listen, he's been around for God knows how long, right? Like all of that kind of stuff. He is all in. He's got his book and all that. I mean, just his book alone, that's 400 something pages on option football is incredible.
What does that book go? I have to get that. It's not on Amazon, right? It's like on.
No, it's like you got to go through a specific website. I think it's First Down Publishing. Like, because I even looked at it and was like, oh, maybe I can just like take this and send it to Dave, right? Like, or whatever. Right. It doesn't allow you to do that because, like, because he has that interactive part of it where it's kind of, like he goes from picture of the play to explanation of the play to video of the play. Like, it's interactive. It's almost like you have to, like, I don't know even how you would share it or do whatever with it.
Now I'm trying to. I see Justin back here now, but I don't see video. So I wonder,
oh boy!
I don't know if I have. If you want, oh, Oh, we're almost there. We're almost there. Oh, he's talking. Is he talking? I guess I can bring him to the stage. Oh, there he is. There he is. You're back.
Let's fucking go.
Welcome
Let's
back.
go. Let's go.
Let's ask this question again. So we talked about and you started great tirade. I'd like to thank StreamYard for making it always so difficult for everybody to stay on for full time. I don't know.
No free shout outs.
Yeah.
Right. But you started to talk about what it takes to success, and I led into it with to get someone from one point X to Z or A to Z. Everyone has a different path, right? But they can get to maybe an elite level. And we talked about, like I said, my example was a construction worker. That guy owns this construction business. You talk about a plumber that you work with that built a gigantic business. And it's not just about how intelligent they are, but understanding who they are and what leveraging what their intelligence is to get them where they need to be. Talk about things that people really do to become successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think number one needs to be they have to have self-awareness. They have to know who they are. Number two is they have to know their role, right? So like you have to know your position within the locker room, right? You don't want to be that guy. And that is social awareness, right? And then the last one is situational awareness, right? And it's like, the wars in which people have, right? You have the war against the world, the war against, others, and then the war against oneself. And if you can master those, then you're going to be successful. But most people, in the process of trying to figure that out, they see themselves or they identify as something that they're actually not. Like at the end of the day, I know who I am. I'm I'm hyper aware of my abilities. And I basically kind of like push my limits, and then I know exactly where that kind of break point is. So I pull right back from there.
Huge.
And I think that's what most people aren't willing to do. Right. And I think that it becomes, I'm comfortable like being in an argument. I'm comfortable fighting. Like I also laugh that I also laugh because like I was at one point in my life a very freak athlete. Like I laugh because like I jumped 39 inches, right? I could throw, I have a cannon for an arm back in the day. Now I could probably do that once now and then I'm hurt. But it also, so I have to like kind of understand that like there's some things that you don't have anymore, but I still have the dog in me, right? So if I can still fight. So that's the other thing too. So the benefit is like if shit goes down, like I know I can break your neck. So it's like I have this like high level of confidence, but you also need to understand like that confidence that doesn't need to turn into arrogance in an area that you maybe not know, because you also don't know someone else's ability. Unless you're constantly put in check, then you're not going to actually have that. In the reason why I think that we struggle with kids today, depression and issues, is because kids have identity issues because they've been told they're something they're not.
Correct.
And until they get to the point where they take ownership for who they actually are and someone else actually puts them in check, that's an issue. Like growing up, my parents did on a regular basis. And I come into a house right now with the same woman for the last 10 years plus, and she puts me in check on a regular basis. If I get on this podcast and we talk a certain game and I get out of there and Tremaine Edmonds and Trey and everybody else basically say, hey, yeah, that didn't happen. You're not that. That wasn't the case, So if Chase listens to this and he hears me and he basically says like, and I was talking that like I choked him out or I did this, like, listen, like that never happened because we didn't get that engagement because I'm not dumb enough. Right.
Right.
So I think what happens is we live in a world where there's very little accountability and everyone's been allowed to say shit that's not true. And even the internet doesn't back you up anymore.
Right. Because that's when you do say shit that's off the chain, right, or whatever, that's what gets the most views, clicks, and everybody wants to be a part of it. Right.
I know, but like, Dave, how many people do we know that are in roles right now that they got into that role by doing the same thing that 30 years ago, women were on their knees for, but guys are doing it because they're lying about it and just basically being the jerk off to the head coach. Sure, and that they understand that if I'm that guy in that locker room as a coach, I will have a job by being basically a snake.
Correct.
And they have jobs right now. They didn't even play. They didn't do anything. We know that all the time. And we see that story happen.
Yeah. So, here's what's interesting about football. And this is sports in general. Okay. Because I didn't serve a long time in corporate because I went off on my own, but I was pretty good at corporate when I was in there my first few years, and I moved up pretty quick. But what was interesting about is this. I knew getting into like what was regular business, meaning like working for somebody else, working for a corporation, that there were going to be people, because I got my MBA, I learned in business school, that there were going to be people that I saw it in the MBA program. That was the first time I saw it, actually. So undergrad, I was finance major. I didn't, I was playing football. I was a good student. I didn't see any of this kind of stuff. I did not. Most people get their MBA, work for several years, okay, and then come back. Well, I was on scholarship, so I just used my last year to start my MBA program. So I had no work experience. So I didn't know I didn't understand anything with respect to that. I was very naive. And I'm in there and I'm listening to people who have worked sometimes for 25 years, right? Sometimes for 5 years. And I watched people manipulate. And I was like, wow. So it was funny because the guys who I was best friends with in the MBA program, one guy at the time, he was in his early 50s, okay, or around 50. The other, and I was, 24. And he was a great guy. He was a Navy guy who then, like, he kind of went to corporate and he went to, government project, wanted to get his MBA as he worked for 20 years and then decided to get MBA so he could kind of advance his career in the latter stages of his career. The other guy I got along great with was actually one of the smartest kids in the program. He was younger like me. He was a programmer, like literally just a programmer. But they had one guy who had been in the two systems already, the Navy and in corporate, and then the other one who had been in no systems but was like a creator back in the day, for lack of a better word. He was like a genius. And I don't know, I knew he became very successful, but I've tracked him in a long time. The older guy I'm friends with to this day. Like, we'll talk, on Facebook. He's like 70 years old. He's a great guy. But what was interesting about it was this: everybody else was manipulating. The guy who'd been around forever could care less. I'm just telling you, could care less about any of that stuff. Like, he already had been through it. Could care less. The young kid was so worried about what he had to do, didn't have time to worry about what everybody else was worrying about, right? So it was very interesting. And then when I went to corporate, I realized, because I used to talk to the guy who had been around it, and he really prepared me for what was gonna be going on at corporate. So I was able to be successful in that area from that standpoint. But what I learned was this: in business, all throughout business, you have people that you can trust, you have people that you can't trust.
Every time.
There are guys that they're ride or die people. There are people that are only in it for money. There are people that are in it to manipulate whatever they can to get to the top. You have multiple different types of individuals all the time. So first I left because I wanted to start my own business and I wanted to coach, right? Which my father's influence was, right? And I thought of coaching itself as a pure thing, right? And I figured my business strength and speed thing would help me have money, so I didn't have to be a teacher if I didn't want to, blah, blah, blah. Well, what happens is from the time I started coaching to now is that coaching is more of a business than corporate was.
No doubt. Yeah, spot on.
Like, people are like, coaching is a business. No, you can't. Like, corporate, are kind of like unwritten rules, right? Like there's like you just can't go F over your boss and not potentially have
there's nothing to come of it. Like,
right, but in coaching you can, and they do, and then just get another job. Like,
yep.
And nobody even thinks twice about it. Like, because that's my boy over there. I don't care that he effed you over. Yep. He's my boy. I'm bringing him over here. You know what I'm saying? In corporate, there were repercussions. If you do that enough times,
that's
you're
it.
going to kind of be you're
going to burn bridges.
You're going to be put out the pasture, In
coaching, I think I got some.
You move up in coaching.
You do, because you knock people off. That you step on top of the person that helped you.
Yep.
So I find it interesting because normally there's a lot of insecurity in leadership roles that they don't want to see people move up. And that's what holds certain people back. But in reality, one of the things that they do to hold you back is the fact it's not the insecurity. It's the fact that they understand that they're gunning for your job. And that's like, why would you want to be ride or die with somebody that they're actually hoping that you have a bad year in one area?
Oh, I hope this guy fails so that I can get the job.
Like,
right?
but I could like, how can, like, I just find that to be, I mean, it's a business like that. It's cutthroat. And that's sad. Like, I gotta admit though, that's
and
really sad.
NFL was a business, but was corporate style. So
of course.
So that was the thing. Like I tell this to Eric all the time.
I think the NFL is still like that though.
I like
the
that
college
better.
is not. College is not.
I like that. I like the college game better. Okay.
No doubt.
I like high school game.
But the system at the NFL with the organizational structure is way better.
Right, and now with the NIL, you're going to have to adopt. You're going to have to put a salary cap on college. Otherwise, it's going to just, you know what I mean? Like, some of those things are going to have to kind of trickle down.
Well, I think businesses are going to start seeing that there is no ROI in those spaces. So there's only so many. Like, the well is not unlimited. That's the issue. So
right, even like you think there is.
Yeah, like the well is not unlimited, so it's going to have to start being like, I guess, a pool of money that gets distributed eventually, you know. But I think that we're going down to a different topic, which is how do you still navigate this and be successful with what you want to do with integrity? And the real answer is that you have to have integrity.
Correct.
Because if you're willing to
start.
Yeah, because the real question is, you know, well, what do I get out of this, right? It's like, well, if you're always looking at that and you're not really seeing the actual value that you're getting from it, right? But you're trying to figure out where you're going to go because of it, then it's a problem. And I think a lot of that has to do with intention, like their intentions, right? So I think, you know, going back to your model in the beginning, which was like taking ex-athletes that were in transition periods in their lives as GAs and saying, hey, you come into this environment, you're going to interact with a lot of players that are going to end up interacting with coaches, and you're the gatekeeper. You interact here. This could be a holding pattern for you to go somewhere. And if you stick and it works out great, you could jump on board and be part of the tour. And it was, I think there were so many, if you and I actually sit down and debriefed the business model that you had, even that I had, and you think about, you know, the missed opportunities to market to just college athletes and say, hey, here's the game plan that we're going to do with you. Like, here's how we're going to deploy it. Right. So many different things could have come out of the model. I think if I go back to opportunities in the combine space, one of the greatest, I got this from a coach, a Division I coach wanted to keep his junior players. He's like, I want to keep the juniors for their senior year. They're bubble players, lower first round, you know, second and third guys, but if they stay one more year and they're healthy, they could be a first round draft pick, right? And it was pretty clear, like, that's what could happen, but they couldn't keep them. And they're trying to figure out why. And the college coach said to me, he's like, Cav, would you be willing to come in and before our spring, before the combine, during our junior days, before that, would you train our juniors so that they look the part, so they're now on the board? And I could go back to mom and dad and I could go to the kid and say, hey, don't go to the league yet. We're bringing a private coach just for you, right? And train those guys to keep them. I think I would have made 10 times the amount of money, because what I would have done is I would have basically said, like, hey, look at the value that I'm bringing back to your organization as a school. And look at the value I'm bringing to that kid. I would have been able to have not just double dipped it, but I would have been able to actually create massive leverage where they have now, because I did this with the Edmonds brothers, right? Like, where the mom and dad was like, hey, can you come down before the kids go down to Exos? Because they're going to go to Exos because they just need to be protected. They don't need to run well. They don't need to do well. They just need to be in an environment that teaches them the system of the NFL Combine. Right.
Whereas they need to learn how to do this stuff.
Yeah. Versus when you work with me, I'm so individualized that I'm going to transform what someone thinks their opinion is of you. And I'm going to make sure that I completely remodel your resume to what the scouts need it to be to make a decision. I was that in tune with what the decision makers were saying. So I would have done that at the college level, and I would have just pitched this to Power 5 schools or to certain programs and said, hey, I'll come in for a week to 2 weeks and basically train your team up on that at a high level. And I would have just done that and just taken, you know, very, very big checks to do that, built those relationships and had my pipeline. Way better business model, so much easier, mitigate risk, way more cash. you don't see that until it's too late. Like I'm out of that part of the business right
and,
now.
And now you couldn't even do it now because guys are moving around so quickly.
It's not worth it, right? It's not worth it. But like as a combine,
do it. Yeah.
I had a freaking amazing facility. I had the weight room. I had every piece of equipment I had in-house doctors. I had in-house trainer, a nutritionist. We had our own chef. We had all the supplementation. We had our own therapy. We had everything in-house. But my facility, a multi-million-dollar, business, couldn't freaking hold a candlestick to any Division I college's facility.
Oh, no way. Yeah, right.
Exos doesn't have as nice of a facility as Nebraska. So if you are an athlete and you're able to do it in that, like it's a much better model. But we didn't think about it because no one else ever done that. I got forced into it a little bit because like the coach had a need. So going to your model, it's like there's companies that just took the data and sold the data. Right. Made more money. So there were so many different opportunities that we didn't see because we
did.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did.
But it's like you look at how much like actual value that was provided to the industry, but where our intentions were how do we do right by the kid and getting kids into college? We never had a backdoor. We never had a reverse strategy to where coaches subscribe to this and then we let them into this world, which is what a lot of other people that was their model. Right.
There is a they're bringing so much of this stuff in house, even though it really doesn't work per se, because the way that the model with NIL and transfer portal is, so many of these kids, like you have no idea the conversations. And good example is Dion, who probably has a pretty good pulse on most of his team. He lost the kid who is from Florida who grew up with him, and he transferred. He was shocked that he was transferring on him. The running back, I can't think of his name. Derek might know, but he was shocked that he transferred on him, right? Because the bottom line is that the environment changed so much in college that nobody trusts anybody, even if they should trust somebody. It's hard for them to trust someone. So I don't know, Derek seems like a great guy. Dave seems like a great guy. Justin seems like a great guy. But so do all these people over here seem like great guys. So how do I know the difference between him and him? That's what was – we used to talk about this in the combine space. I used to tell this – remember Tony used to work for me?
Yeah.
I used to tell Tony this because Tony, obviously really personable guy. You know that. I used to like –
2-minute Tony, the man.
The man. So I would tell Tony, I'd be like, at some point, parents are going to look at it. They won't know the difference between what we do and what the other guy does. And as soon as that happens, which will happen, that our business model in the combine space is going to change dramatically.
Yeah.
Right. And then eventually it happened. Right. I always knew, even when we were riding high, that's probably why you always saw me like somewhat nervous about everything, because I knew that at some point I could see, because I talked to the parents. I used to get the emails, I used to read the emails, good or bad. Like I could tell that people had a hard time figuring out the difference between maybe what we did
and then somebody else.
It's not a piece of software, right? It's not a piece of software that does X that no one else can replicate, right? But even now, shoot, you can't tell the difference between this software and that software, right? Yeah. Even those models, you're like, okay, eventually your model, whatever it is, business or sports, whatever, if it gets to a point where it becomes a commodity where I can't tell the difference between you and somebody else, whether you're a good guy or not, that is a very difficult thing. And in business school, they used to call it perfect competition. Okay. Perfect competition is where there becomes so many competitors that there is negligible or nil amount of profit margin in the business, right? So what's happened in a lot of businesses now, you're always trying to stay ahead of the curve, right? You're
figuring out, of course.
Like I do something new, I think, but what happens in a lot of businesses now, because things are like worldly and global to this extent, is that your little advantage, okay, or even if you have a sizable advantage, is going to get chipped away faster than ever towards perfect competition, which perfect competition used to be a fascinating thing to me when they taught it in business school, because it would go through my head over and over again. Okay, I create a niche, I become successful, they eat away at it. What happens in the end? What happens is, why do you see companies sell before that. Guys who recognize it well, okay, because
they exit.
They exit before that happens because they know it's going to happen. Maybe a year or two down the road, maybe 10 years down the road, but at some point it's going to happen. So they take whatever they can so they can live off of that until they find the next opportunity.
Of course.
Right? Or some retire. I guess we do well enough. But that's that perfect competition is. So what is everybody doing even in sports, right? You're trying to commoditize talent so you have perfect competition opportunity where the difference is this is what the NFL tries to do, is negligible so the TV product is better, right? Perfect competition. They don't get, obviously you're not getting there. So you need, but you're going to be there at certain spots. So positions where you could argue there's levels of perfect competition. One of them is inside linebacker, right?
Yep.
Almost a dead position. I could take any great athlete that's a safety, an outside linebacker, guys like me and you, Cav, right? And say, I could find 150 of these guys.
There's a lot of us now. Yeah, back then there wasn't, which is crazy because
there wasn't.
Nobody wanted to bang. Nobody wanted to
Nobody wanted to do that.
Yeah. And if you could, you were one-dimensional. You were one-dimensional, right? And I wanted to hit you before the line of scrimmage because I knew I couldn't catch you if you were past it, right? And that played into instincts too. And most people didn't have both. Nowadays, they're a dime a dozen.
Yeah, a dime a dozen. And now, obviously, the great ones are difference makers, but they churn out so many of the second tier and third tier guys at the NFL level because what's the difference between one another? As soon as he runs out of the energy, the size, the speed, whatever, move the next guy in. Same thing.
Right.
The fullback position obviously became that way, right? The guard positions started to become that way, but because the game lacks physicality, you might see the run game. Derek and I have talked about this. You might see the ability to run the ball become very successful again because everybody's spreading it out. So maybe the right guard or the left guard on the zone becomes more valuable because of that. I mean, down the line, but they've tried to commoditize that, right? They try to commoditize as much as they could right tackle, but left tackle's almost uncommoditizable, right?
Yep.
You try, but how many of those guys are there? Very, very few of those kind of people, humans on Earth, right? It's like
just massive human beings.
The center, they try to commoditize the center in the NBA, and then you get guys like Jokic, right?
Yeah.
And
guys that revolutionized and changed the way that position is played. Right? Like,
well, I mean, what's crazy, people don't realize this. Yeah, people don't realize, like, you want to go back and see something crazy? Go back and watch Orlando Magic Shaquille O'Neal highlights.
Yeah.
How freak of an athlete is he?
Right.
Like skinny, athletic movement, just freak athlete, not big man. Like he looks like he's wearing his dad's clothes. Yeah, it's a 5X on him, but relative to what he was later in his career,
totally
LA, Miami, you look at that, man, like he was a monster. Right. And like athletic wise, those are just different people. And then he had to evolve to the game because he was getting older. So he put on weight, changed his model like that. Like, I think that's one of the things going back to what makes businesses, executives, athletes successful because they have such good self-awareness and they know themselves and then they know their role. They understand that their role could change.
Yes.
Right. So their role today needs to change. And this is where I think the athletes like a LeBron aren't having the success because he won't be a 2. And if he was willing to let a model be where he could be a 2, he could go win 2-3 more championships
and play another 5 years probably.
Because you have to give the man, like, you got to give the whiner credit that that he has had he has longevity. You have to give him credit. You have to give him credit outside of the Diddy parties. He is less suspect than the other character athletes that you deal with, like the way he showed up. And I don't know him, and I don't have any dog in the fight here. So we're just joking on what what arguments that people could have. But you do look at it and you go, man, if he were to understand that, and other people understood, like, we need to go get the next young guy and let him dish him the rock. Like, he could be that guy, but I don't. And again, there's so many other dynamics in play here.
Right.
people need to understand that. Look at the way people play the game and how effortless it looks for the older guy. Like they just it becomes almost effortless because they go like, I'm not fighting that battle. Like I'm not going to go get you. I'm going to make sure that I position you differently. So you have to come to me, like I'm not going to waste energy. And that just becomes so fascinating to watch elite level athletes learn how, it's like the old guy that,
it's almost work smarter, not harder. Right. Like that's almost kind of what it comes down.
Right. The Larry Bird, Magic Johnson style of play,
end of their careers.
Which went out.
Yeah.
He's back. Like what is Jokic? He's like a gigantic Larry Bird. I mean,
look how good he's got handles. Like look how good his handles are.
What was Magic Johnson? He was a 6'9"
guard. A monster of a point guard.
Right, but he could post up. He could shoot a little bit from the out. Like they could do all those kind of things. And that's it. It's so funny how that and that's the whole thing. Is like Steph Curry revolutionized the 3-point game, and then it became a commodity. Everyone shoots it, right?
No one started practicing from 7 feet off that line. They were like, "Why would I even do that? I would get right to it and work that environment and work that range." By the way, people don't realize this. Like, take the worst shooters in the NBA and just put no pressure on them and have them shoot.
Oh, they make everything.
They're lights out. The only difference is like you're forgetting the fact that the guy in front of you is that good too.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think about it the same way, like as this kind of comes to it, like a little bit of a close, like I'd look at it and I go, man, like it's the same thing in business. It's the same thing in life. It's the same thing. Like, look, yeah, we have to be, I do have a very different personality in roles, right? Because I understand my role, you'll see me flip it on. Like, Dave, you've seen me coach, right? I love coaching linebackers. I love coaching offensive linemen. Like I can't stand coaching the quarterbacks, but it's a lot easier nowadays.
Oh God, yeah.
I love coaching the quarterback. I don't have to move that much. I just bring him in the corner and talk to him a little bit, and everyone's like, it's funny, but I was like at the NFL Combine space, I became like the quarterback guru, and I'm like, I know the quarterback gurus, and I laugh because I'm like, you guys are putting me in that category of these guys, and I laugh. It's because I just had a lot of quarterbacks that came to me. It's not that like if you're a coach, right? And I like you to get in the details. I like to get really, really deep into like the technical level and the tactics and be able to start to understand, the game. But I mean, if you see me coach a linebacker, like there is a different level of intensity that I bring coaching in that environment. That if I'm coaching a wide receiver, I don't see that it's very beneficial to yell at them into a cut. Whereas as a linebacker, I find it very, very beneficial to get in his grill if he's playing soft off the ball, right? Like I just find that the results are different based upon the personalities, and I am hyper sensitive to the individual and into the dynamic. It's the same thing in business, right? So at the NFL Combine level, someone says, hey, coach, I want to do the impossible at the mathematical level. It is highly unlikely that I'm going to make it. Okay, you paid me to do this. I'm going to slam your head in the pail. You think that your job is to bring the horse to water and let them choose. That athlete had a choice. He chose for me to coach him. I slammed their head in the pail. They either drink or they drown. That's your choice. You're going to drown or drink the water, buddy. Because you told me I'm responsible now for your success.
Yep, because now my name
I
is
can't
on it.
do it. The only thing I can do is slam your head in the pail. I can't actually do the work.
Right.
Now,
my name is on it, though, right? So I'm definitely going to take it to a different level, right?
And in business, now it's just a matter of like me understanding like not everyone is there for that same purpose. Some people are there for a paycheck, to put food on their plate, for them to like, they're not all high performers. They all can't be us. So I take the role of a coach very serious, and I do take the leadership role just as serious. So if I'm a coach, my job is to advance the position and the outcome and make a change. If I'm a leader, my job is to empower you to be able to create the goal that we want and make a change. They're two separate things, and your job is to understand where and when to be like that. Because if you're like that all the time, you're just a dick.
Let's close on that. I like that. Well, Justin, it's been great having you on, dude. Awesome conversation. I could talk to you. It's just like yesterday. You know what I mean? So it's great listening to you. I learned a lot today. It's been great having you on, man. And, I've got to come to one of your conferences. You're going to have to send me because I first want to be a guest. I want to be a guest, but then eventually I want to be on that stage with you.
Oh man, I'll always bring you on the stage. I think we should do this again. Start a pod and get you talking. I got some good questions for you. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, now, like from a business standpoint, I run Athlete HQ working with our athlete side, but then we have an executive portion, right? I'm in my 6th Olympic cycle right now, getting ready for Paris with a group of guys.
Let's go.
That's exciting.
Let's go.
It's exciting, but I'm also
I love the Olympics.
I'm also I'm knee deep in the NFL still, where I'm working with guys and keeping them healthy and trying to get guys that want to have longer careers.
So important.
I mean, look at like Caleb Williams getting drafted. Caleb went into my building when he was 12 years old. Chris Basha had that kid, and no one even knows who Coach Basha is. He's a great freaking coach. A lot of people in the area, he's like a legend, but like he's a great man. He's a great man. But like he identified that kid when he was a puppy. And he basically just had him and he took care of him and he did it the right way. Nobody knows. Like I loved all the talk about like the marketing of like Caleb Williams. Like that was all smart. He knows what he's doing. He's
strategic.
A baller.
We have a kid right now.
Absolutely knows what he's doing.
It's the same marketing. It's phenomenal.
And you got to give credit to a coach, like Basha, that has put the time in with somebody for almost a decade, probably, maybe even longer, to support a kid's goal that says, hey, even if the kid doesn't have the talent at 12, 13, 14, or 15, like see that. The kid, well, maybe he did identify it, or maybe the kid just had the will and then he worked his way into, the coach's acceptance. But the reality is that coach gave him everything from day one. And still to this day. And if you look at where that kid is, man, there's a lot to look back on and say, hey, you know what? Would those kids had the career that they had if it weren't for, NUC? Because the opportunities sometimes create the athlete.
Right.
Without that pressure.
If you didn't realize that by going to that event that maybe you were separate and you were a little different than some of these others, maybe you don't take that road, right? Or maybe
exactly, and it goes both ways.
Direction.
You don't get the opportunity, and you don't also get the opportunity to rise to the occasion. And that's what I think a lot of kids did. So for me, I'm very grateful for all of these opportunities for kids, but I'm also very proud of like the coaches that like stuck with kids and did it the right way.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's kind of where I am now. Like I'm still in the NFL side. I'm still in the executive coaching side, working with people. Last year we did our biggest acquisition to date, which we bought a company called Sites at Scale. And we build websites and do online presences for businesses and marketing. Awesome. And it's like watching that work. I mean, I got 107 people on staff. I don't have 7 that can handle me coaching them the way I coach an athlete. So I have to evolve. So it's probably one of the greatest changes in my career too, right? Is me actually evolving and getting better, because if I stay the same,
that ain't working.
I can't, I honestly, I can't come down and plug a hole like I would like to in business, like I do on the field. Number one, physically, I can't do it anymore. And number two, I won't have a lot of people that want to work with me anymore.
Exactly. Because people,
so I have to change those things and evolve. And I think that's how we stay alive and survive.
Yep. And that's where the self-awareness comes in, which is phenomenal.
You got it, guys. Hey man, absolute pleasure. Let's do it again. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you as always. All right.
All right, brother. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Coach.
Got it, man.
All right, that was a great one. All right, we'll end it up from here, and till next week. We have to figure out who we got next week. Do we have anybody next week yet? I think we have to figure it out. We have to figure out next week. But great podcast, another great one, slam dunk. I mean, listen, I'll tell you this: our live viewership it's very high. It's very high, dude. It's very high.
In the spring, brother.
It's been high. It's been very high numbers, and it's been consistent. So
awesome.
But awesome. All right. Till next time. Let's get us on out here.